How's it going, guys? So, I probably don't need to tell you guys or anything, depending, obviously, the title below says everything. Um, the whole world, let alone the Dragon Ball community, is still in mourning over the passing of Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama, who passed away on March 1st at the relatively young age of 68. But it wasn't formally announced until this past Friday of last week. So I had thought in the last couple of days, I had thought about how would I even begin to try and pay tribute to a man whose work, again, this goes without saying, but has not only impacted the lives of millions of people, that have transcended multiple boundaries just with like a cartoon alone, an anime and manga, but also has impacted my own particular life in how I grew up as a child in the 1990s. So I thought I should lead with that instead of trying to make anything too elaborate, because there's plethora of YouTube tributes videos around the web now, which is, does it in their own way. So I think for me, I remember the first time I ever fell in love with anime, obviously, was Toonami and the appearance of a cartoon at the time called Dragon Ball Z, and this had to have been 1997 or 98. So I probably was either 10 or 11 years old at the time. And up until that point, before then, I had seen my fair share of not like anime, but like little bits of it. And at the time, they were more geared towards more darker and more adult themed type of shows coming from Japan. And they were aired mostly late night, so it wasn't like I could stay up late at the time without going to bed. And a lot of the bits that I had seen up until then was very adult themed, not in the explicit way, but they were more adult themed in the sense of they were a lot more intense, they were a lot more mature, they were a lot more darker. So as somebody growing up in the mid 90s, I was like 8 years old, they weren't appealing to look at, So by the time around the turn of 96, 97, when I was starting to watch Toonami at the time, and just getting whiff of this new show called Dragon Ball Z, I was just very intrigued of what was about this show that was going to be. And at the time too, I was also watching things like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and shows of that particular vein. So I was going in with the mindset of, okay, it's going to be similar to those type of shows, amongst other things that Japan had produced and had aired in different countries here and there. And my surprise, this was like the Raditz episodes, Goku and Piccolo versus Raditz, and at the time I didn't really see fighting that was this intense before. And looking back now, it was just, considering that in these episodes Goku was getting beat the crap out of, and Piccolo also too, having his arm cut off and everything. This was very disarming to me as a kid at the time. And I was of the mind thinking of like, oh, these are the good guys, and the good guys are going to win, but not quite the beginning here. Little did I know, years down the line, a lot more things would be clarified. So, I watching Dragon Ball Z at this time was almost kind of like not only a gateway for me to probably the greatest cartoon to have impacted me greatly, but also a cartoon that was also huge enough and just like big enough to like really claim your own at the time. You had Sailor Moon, which was the Dragon Ball Z per se for girls at the time, but for boys you didn't really have that kind of flagship show that you can see and you can like claim it as your own, that this is my favorite show. As the 90s kept rolling on, and I kept watching the show and like following the Saiyan saga into the Namek saga, even with the change of studios and vocal actors, it still deepened and deepened its appeal, and I was just so engrossed now in the adventures of Goku and just how this continuously escalated way into the 2000s, the Cell saga, the Android saga, and then my personal favorite, which was Gohan turning Super Saiyan 2. This show was unlike anything that I had ever seen before, growing up way into the 90s and then into my high school years, and just seeing the progression of this show in America, at least, it was just so impacting and just so creative, and so it grabbed you by the collar, and it just like took you for this ride, and just all sorts of like ups and downs and like turns and maturity and character growth, particularly for Gohan, who I personally related to the most growing up. And then Dragon Ball, the first series, and then GT and everything else that came after. All of this I can always be attributed and forever attributed to just one single man, and that man obviously is Akira Toriyama. And for one man to have done all this with the invaluable help of all the Japanese voice actors and the American voice actors and the designers, the illustrators, the music crew in Japan and every other country that this show was syndicated in, his passion for not only animation, for drawing, but also his style has been so influential to the point of like, if this one single cartoon was enough to impact culture all over the world, let alone my particular life, then that speaks more to the testament of single man's vision, and more importantly his passion to really let his passion speak more from his art, as opposed to the other way around, which is the passion comes secondary and then the money and everything comes first. And you can see how certain animations and stuff, how they did not make it, because it lacked that fundamental basic which Akira Toriyama had from day one, which was that passion and that innocence. So much so that like I'm practically surprised that there's not that many interviews of him, which is funny because this morning I was watching a video, and I believe it's an interview of him, and he's showing people, or he's showing like the camera. They don't show his face or anything, like visually speaking from the camera, of him making this basic drawing of Goku on paper with a marker. And the thing that really impressed me when I saw this was I mean, not just his drawing of Goku, like from straight out of thin air, but once he finished his drawing, he then kind of like looks like comments of the drawing, and then he says, I made a couple of mistakes here because Goku's hair is over his eye and this thing here and that thing there. And I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking of like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, right? Like, you call this like a mistake, or like, not that he called a mistake, but like you said, a mistake here, a mistake there, which to me, like, I look at that and I'm thinking like, I don't see a mistake at all, you know? But that says volumes, not just only to the craftsmanship and the particular detail that Toriyama had, but also more than that. You look at Dragon Ball, you look at Dragon Ball Z, and like every creative endeavor that he's done, there's a childlike innocence to everything. To like the main character Goku, of how his personality is so childlike, and yet he is this very powerful fighter, one of the, if not the most powerful fighters of all time. But his childlike innocence is just, no matter what transformation that he went to, it always stayed there. And I think more than anything, you got a clear sense of what Toriyama, what kind of person he was, because no matter how serious the show got, no matter what other different endeavors creatively that he headed into, you always get that childlike innocence, that childlike quality in the personality of most of the characters, in most of the scenes, in most of even like the heavy serious scenes. There always seemed to be kind of like a glimpse or some kind of glimmer of this childlike quality that came out. And boiling that down to who Akira Toriyama was deep in his personality as a person. He was a person that was very filled with wonder, that loved the world and just loved every facet of the world as he could see. And he translate that into his drawings and into his work, with just passion and vigor, and I think more than anything, that childlike wonder is how people still, like, even this morning I was looking at your YouTube video, and there's billions of people in Latin America, especially in like Argentina. I mean, that show had a huge impact in Latin America. Like, when I was traveling to Peru, like, how long ago was this? Like almost 15 or so years ago, there was huge fandom for Dragon Ball Z even to this day, but especially back then, it was especially apparent. People were singing the Latin American theme song for the show. They were saying Goku, Super Saiyan, or at least what they call in Latin America, Super Saiyajin. And when I think back to that, and when I look at a video of Argentinians like surrounding the statue of Goku in one of the public squares, that speaks to me of like how just his childlike innocence and how he translated that to all his work, how it touched people in a very deep way from all the characters, not just only Goku, of how that innocence had manages to be transverberant to all the generations, regardless of culture, class, nationality. You could think of anything, and then Dragon Ball Z and his Akira Toriyama's style has impacted everyone and everything. So, and I know for me personally, through this show, He has single-handedly enriched my life to the point where whenever I look back to my childhood, and whenever I look back to what it was like to be a kid growing up in the 90s, I can't help but just feel so just misty-eyed and just wonder-filled that this man had enriched my childhood. This man has changed the way I look at anime, and this man has single-handedly made my life completely different now than it would have been had it not been for his vision and Dragon Ball Z as a franchise. That speaks more volumes to me than any award or accolade, and I'm sure Akira Toriyama felt the exact same way. As much as accolades and awards and praise that he has gotten all through his life, I get the feeling that none of that mattered compared to his love of animation, his childlike passion for this work, even right down to the very last moments. He always held that. I felt, at least. So it's just 68. I mean, to be taken so soon at that young age of 68 is just, I mean, I have the same exact expression as everyone else is, just mix of just sadness that this had to happen so quickly, and yet I am just so filled with gratitude as well of how Akira Toriyama has changed culture, has changed boundaries, has transcended boundaries, and has enriched the lives of millions of people and continues to do so. And you know, I just really want to leave with this of saying, Akira Toriyama, thank you so much for enriching my life, enriching the lives of millions of people all over the world across all boundaries, and may your work continue to transcend and change people way past even after you have gone. And I wished there was more time for you to still be here, but when time calls, it calls. So rest in peace, Akira Toriyama. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for enriching my world and my life with this show and your passion and your childlike wonder, and for teaching us that it's okay to dream, and it's okay to wonder and to dream of a better future, a more happy future, a future that I'm sure you envisioned for everyone. Rest in peace, Akira Toriyama. Thank you for everything.